Truth or Consequences is the fifth episode of the first season of All Grown Up, at least in terms of the production code. And this is a really great episode with a wonderful ending. I won't explain the ending just now, but I will with a spoiler warning. This is a story about Tommy. Finally, most of the episodes up until this point have not focused on Tommy. And it also focuses a little on Dill. And I thought that was an interesting decision, almost like they're saying, we can't have a story about Tommy without Dill, or vice versa. It would be quite interesting if we had a story about one or the other, but both stories worked really well. Tommy's story is a little bit more straightforward. He wants to make this film, but he's filming his friends, and they're in embarrassing situations because he thinks it will make interesting footage. But the rest of the Rugrats characters find out, and they're not very happy. And Tommy has to make a decision: does he want to do what he thinks is right for his art, or what he thinks is right by his friends? Of course, I won't say exactly what happens, but I think it's definitely a really interesting episode. Really nice to see Tommy getting a bit of focus for a change. That also means we get a little bit of Didi and Stu and Spike as well. Spike featured very briefly, and because he's filming all of the other characters, it also means the rest of them, Chuckie, Kimi, Susie, Angelica, Phil and Lil, all feature a reasonable amount. Phil and Lil spend most of the episode inside their mother's jumper, which is pretty funny. So I like that part of the narrative, and I'll come back to that with a spoiler warning. The story with Dill, though, is the one that I found to be more moving. Dill is seeing a therapist or psychologist, I can't remember exactly which, but he's seeing somebody who thinks that he's a bit odd and has some peculiar behaviours, and it definitely does highlight that Dill is a bit of an odd character. I was thinking maybe his behaviour is the way it is because he's younger than the others, so he's not quite as mature as them, but actually he is a very interesting character, and he doesn't get an official diagnosis or anything. I don't know exactly what he will be diagnosed with, but the way Didi handled it is great. And again, I'll come back to that with a spoiler warning in a moment. So I really enjoyed this episode. I think it had a lot going on, a lot of really lovely messages, very well animated, of course, great pacing, really good balance between Tommy and Dill. Most of the focus was on Tommy's part of the narrative, but Dill got enough time to shine as well, because up until this point, neither of them has been the centre of attention, which is the complete opposite of what it was like with Rugrats, the classic series. So definitely a nice change of pace. So spoilers from now, I'll discuss the final outcome with Tommy's story and also Didi in Dill's. Didi stood up for Dill and basically said, just because he's different, it doesn't mean he needs to change. I love it. I love that message so much, because I think as a society, if somebody behaves different behaviours, even if that behaviour is not troubling or damaging or hurting anybody, there is this instant need to try and change them, to make them fit the mould of society. And it's just ridiculous. Why should they? Why should they change to be like other people? I am so pleased that Didi stood up for him. There was a weird thing in this where apparently Dill was behaving the way he is because Phil and Lil dropped him on his head as a baby. I think that's a little bit awkward and not really something I'm very pleased with. I don't think it was a good decision to kind of, first of all, make light of that. Although I suppose it might make any older viewer wary of giving a young baby to a not that much older baby. But I didn't really like that. I didn't like they were saying basically that Phil and Lil brain damaged Dill. I feel like that's just a step too far and a little bit uncomfortable, but thankfully it wasn't so much of the main focus. It's not like that was getting a lot of attention, and I just love Didi standing up for Dill. So, Tommy, what Tommy ultimately did, I adored, because Tommy decided to use bits of the footage he had, but then edit in footage of the Rugrats babies when they were younger. But what's most interesting is that most of the clips are slightly older. So Chuckie must be about 4 or 5 in his clip. There's a clip of Phil and Lil where they're a little bit older. Lil has slightly longer hair. Angelica's a little bit older in hers as well. So it's kind of like saying what Rugrats would be like if they'd grown up a little bit, but not fully. And I just thought that was adorable and such a good decision. They could have been lazy. They could have very easily just taken clips from the classic Rugrats cartoons and just slotted them in. No need to animate anything new, but actually they decided to go one step further and show us what the babies would look like when they were a tiny bit older. And I thought that worked really well. Definitely I think Chuckie was still wearing the same t-shirt. I'm not 100% confident that that's the case, but I'm pretty sure he was wearing something very similar, if not. But that aside, yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Truth or Consequences is a brilliant episode of All Grown Up with a lot of great things going for it.